parliamentary systems are most, including those in India, think of themselves, if they are with the ruling coalition, as being in power and having the power to do things. And if they are out of power, then they think of themselves as having very little to do in the assembly. Many people will not show up. They will focus instead, and I think rightly so, on getting elected and getting back into power, right? Yet I think there are three ways that each of you, even if you are out of power at the moment or your coalition is out of power, three things that make bipartisanship matter quite a lot. The first of which is speech, the second of which is presence, and the third is deal-making. So I'll talk really briefly about my own research, which is I focus and I write about regulatory pragmatism, which is the design and implementation of a regulatory system that is specifically adapted for the context in which regulation will occur. Regulatory pragmatism has the really distinct advantage of lowering costs. So if you're being pragmatic, you can actually get a lot more done for a less costly system. Now, when it comes to speech, I think it's really important that first you let your constituents speak, right? Listening to their concerns and knowing the context and knowing exactly what it is that they want from you, even if it's noting their birthday, is incredibly important, because what you are supposed to do is communicate their concerns to the legislature. So one of the most important things you can do, even if you're out of power, is to actually relay those concerns, to interject those concerns into the regulatory process. If you do so, at the very least, your the coalition or the party that is in power can consider them and maybe change the legislation. This is really important because I study compliance, and people do not always comply with regulations or laws that they disagree with. So incorporating different perspectives as part of the legislative process actually lowers the cost of compliance. It lowers the degree to which you have to use force to go out and get people to comply. So including more people in the early process really helps to make legislation more effective. The second thing I'd like to talk about is presence. And I'll provide you with an anecdote from my own university. Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame, we govern ourselves democratically, internally, and we have these very long faculty meetings. We all have to participate. It can be a real pain. One of the interesting things that I think each of you can bring to the table is your mere presence as a representative. Now, as a woman in a university, that's actually quite unusual, especially at the faculty level. In my own school, the Keough School of Global Affairs, we are 39% women, which is very high. And I've had some really interesting conversations, especially with my male colleagues, about what that does to the conversation. Now, my female colleagues might not say anything, but they're there, and they're there in decently high numbers. And my male colleagues say that they don't say certain things that they might otherwise, and they actually do speak up in other ways that they wouldn't otherwise, just because we're there. So if you are from maybe not a minority, so if you're a woman, being there is important. If you are from a minority group, being there is important. Just your presence actually has force, is what I want to suggest to you. The final thing I'll suggest is that bipartisan deal-making in parliamentary systems can be incredibly powerful. Remember what I said a moment ago about the cost of compliance. If people do not feel as if the legislation represents them, they may vote with their feet, they may not comply, or there's a famous academic named James Scott, he talks about the weapons of the weak. And what the weak do, or those out of power, is they maybe slow things down, right? They may comply, but they do so very slowly. They make things late. They may do other things to make compliance more costly. And it basically mucks up the legislative process and the regulatory process. So if you actually engage in bipartisan deal making, even in a parliamentary system, what you do is you bring more people on board. And by bringing more people on board, by having them be represented, it actually changes how compliance works after the fact.